All right, boxing fans, it's been a while since I've recorded one of these particular types of episodes. I do recommend that you go back in time, combattalkradio.net, the main site, but here on YouTube, if you're already here, go back in time. I actually created a playlist for it because I think it warrants some more attention. And I'm going to be more diligent about recording these now going forward because I think it's important. And that's the Lifeblood of Boxing series, which I started a while ago. And for those that don't know, the Lifeblood of Boxing series is designed to celebrate those fighters that gave us the quality fights that we deserve as boxing fans, that reignited our faith and belief in the great sport. These are not the ones that are evading any kind of action. These are the ones that kind of go in and go all out and they change history. And there's quite a few of them. We're seeing more and more of them. There's a couple I'd love to cover, but I want to give them a little bit more time to marinate. I know some of you don't like that word, but that's what it is. A little bit more time to marinate. But one came to thought. I've never done a coverage on him, and I think now's the time because I think this is one that people don't give the credit he deserves, given how he came up. And he's a favorite of mine, and he may or may not be retired. It sounds like he may be close to it. It hasn't been announced, but sounds like he might have been close to a decision. And that's Jeff the Hornet Horn, fighting out of Australia. Jeff Horn, this man, he's best known. He's not only known, but he's best known for his win defeating Manny Pacquiao. And people can say he didn't beat Manny Pacquiao. At the end of the day, Jeff Horn got his hand raised against Manny Pacquiao. And I could even tell you why. And we'll get there. But I want to tell the story about why he belongs in Lifeblood of Boxing series. People don't know that Jeff Horn started late. He started way late. He was an amateur only in 2011, 2012, and he was in the Olympics. He got to the finals. He didn't do all that great, but he got to the finals. And the thing about Horn, I'm pretty sure he had the same trainer all the way through, same guy. And Horn had, when he was coming up, he's mostly been regional. He's held regional titles on multiple occasions. ANBF, WBO, PABA, IBF. He's held regional and intercontinental titles. It wasn't until he fought Manny that he got on the world stage. Before we get there, though, he has fought some very interesting people in his past. One of my Lifeblood of Boxing series coverages is the knockout king, Randall Bailey. Randall Bailey held up to his name all the way through his entire career until he eventually left the business. He truly is and was one of the best to ever lace them up, in my opinion. Even in loss, he was always there and always game and always fought as hard as he could. Jeff Horn's actually the one who retired Randall Bailey. Randall Bailey, I gave the story on that coverage that he's since gone to kind of full-time work and he's happy doing what he's doing, and he felt that the business was very sketchy and just not really what he wanted to do. And there was a lot of controversy behind him leaving the business, when and why he did, fights that he felt that he was cheated out of, fights that should have been him, getting back into the contention, and things happening that shouldn't have really happened, and all the stuff that happened with Devin Alexander and so on. So there was a lot of things going on with that. But Randall Bailey finally stepped down and officially retired after Jeff Horn beat him. That was in 2016. And now he's making a positive life for himself. The other fighter that I'll spotlight is Ali Faneca. And people say that Ali Faneca is not that much of a fighter, but it's Ali Faneca himself. He was a mainstay. He was mostly regional. He also held world titles. But what's important about Ali Faneca isn't necessarily him, but rather who he fought. Ali Faneca has one of the most solid resumes in the business in terms of who he fought. And most notably, I'd say his signature win of everybody else was Zahir Rahim. Zahir Rahim, of course, is a very well-known fighter from the old school. Zahir Rahim is I'd say, most well-known for two fights. One, he beat Eric Morales, and the other one is where he lost, but really shouldn't have lost, against Popo Freitas, and that's 2006. So Ali Fanica beat a very solid fighter. Ali Fanica also has fought other guys like a Nate Campbell, for example, Sammy Vargas, and Jeff Horn, Zolani Morali. He's fought some decent fighters. He's had a solid resume. And Joanne Guzman, I don't want to dismiss him. He's fought some decent opposition. Jeff Horn comes along. Jeff Horn stops Ali Fanica. Jeff Horn was en route to losing that fight, and Jeff Horn pulled it out, and he deserves credit for that performance in that fight. So Jeff Horn, prior to fighting Manny Pacquiao, had already faced some really solid competition on the way up. And when you look at the build up to this, nobody thought that Jeff Horn would have a chance against Manny Pacquiao. Everybody expected that Jeff Horn was going to get completely dominated. There were a couple of things that happened, though. First of all, for whatever reason, Manny Pacquiao, the A-side, the champion, WBO, 2017, agrees to go to Brisbane, Australia, which is Horn's hometown, rather than Manny pulling A-side ticket and saying, no, you're going to come travel over here. And the belief was probably from Bob Arum to simply have the Australian fans to help fund the fight, because Manny's paycheck obviously would be large. And I don't know, in my mind, I don't really know or understand why the Australia trip made sense for Manny, why he felt like that was the right decision other than to help fund the fight. I understand why Jeff Horn was chosen. I'm pretty sure Jeff Horn was a mandatory leading into that fight, which is why the fight needed to happen. I'm pretty sure that's true. If he wasn't a mandatory, then it might have simply been a quick replace, because I know at around the time, Amir Khan, they had been chatting about, Amir Khan going to be fighting with Pacquiao and happen in Dubai, and that's what was going to fund the fight. Of course, there's a lot of rich people out there. Bob Arum was one of the ones lying about that one, saying, yep, it's going to happen, this is going to go, and da-da-da-da-da. And that fell through, if it even was a thing. Nobody really knows if it was a thing. But allegedly, this was going to be a thing to fight Amir Khan. Amir Khan said it. Pacquiao said it. Arum said it. They all said this, banked off of the fans saying that he should fight Amir Khan. And, of course, Amir Khan would have been a soft touch for Manny Pacquiao. That would have been a very soft touch, and it would have been positioning to give him a highlight reel knockout. Jeff Horn was still on the docket. I can't remember if he was a mandatory. I know that they were still trying to chat it out. Might have just been Bob Arum trying to find a country and a fighter that was backed by a country, and ultimately it fell to Jeff Horn after the alleged Khan fallout. But Manny goes in the presser. If you go back and watch the press in the buildup, Manny was completely dismissing this guy. Manny was texting on his phone. Manny didn't have eye contact. Manny wasn't doing what we expected he should do. Okay, so then leading up to the fight, we're expecting that, again, Manny Pacquiao should make easy work of this guy, because Jeff Horn, although he had the credentials of Randall Bailey, win, stoppage, Ali Fanica, win, TKO, Rico Muller even, I'll throw that one in there. Even though he had these solid fights just before Manny Pacquiao, and even though Manny Pacquiao, for his side, he's coming into the fight fresh off wins, the rubber match on Tim Bradley, and where he got the belt back, or basically the vacant. It went vacant, but he got, because of Floyd, but he got the belt back WBO, and then beats Jesse Vargas for the official WBO. So Manny's coming off two decent wins. Bradley obviously was the stick point, because nobody really wanted the third Bradley fight. And he got a lot of flack for accepting that fight. But it had to be solved, because it was a rubber, it had to be solved. Nobody asked for Jesse Vargas. My understanding is Jesse Vargas was there because of an eliminator, but I'm not sure. All I know is that Manny's coming off two decent, not great decision wins. Jeff Horn's coming off two, I would argue, much more solid stoppage wins, and then one pretty good stoppage win. People can say, well, Randall was washed up and Ali was washed up and all this. The point is that Randall Bailey was a danger to everybody he stepped in that damn ring with every single time, Every single out, he was dangerous. He was fresh off. 2 knockouts. This is not a guy that you took lightly in Randall Bailey. Even in the later years of his career, he was still just as dangerous as he always been. If anything, he seemed like he got even more dangerous. And this is going back, referring to the Mike Jones fight back in 2012. This is on the undercard. I'm pretty sure it was Pac Bradley 1 for the IBF, where he got the IBF and then Devin Alexander beat him for it. And the Mike Jones, that changed history. That fight completely changed history around what Arum was planning to do. So Randall Bailey was in that time frame that we're talking about here. Randall Bailey was still in people's eyes as a dangerous fighter to get in the ring with. Horn stops him, gets him out, and Horn had some issues in that fight, but he ultimately got it done. So Manny's taking this guy lightly because he was not highly regarded. He was not highly ranked. He was only regional, Jeff Horn. And so Manny's texting on the phone. He's not paying any attention to this guy. You can go look at the old press conferences videos. Manny wasn't taking this guy serious at all. Okay, so we get close to the fight, and there's an energy that can't be explained. And I'm on places like NSB telling them, I think Jeff Horn is going to pull this out. And I think you guys are not giving him credit. And I think Manny's going to take an L here. And don't overlook Jeff Horn, because I watched what he did to Randall Bailey. I watched what he did to Ali Fanica. At the time that Jeff Horn fought Ali Fanica, we're not talking like Ali Fanica was completely decrepit in age here. Okay, he's in his 40s now. At the time he fought Jeff Horn, he's in his 30s. He was roughly close to the same age as Manny Pacquiao when Horn fought Ali Fanica. So I was not going to overlook Horn, but it was also more about Manny and the fact that Manny felt like he just wasn't taking this guy serious. And anytime we just saw this nonsense with potentially Blair the Flair Cops, where he wasn't taking the guy serious that's in front of him, and then he takes a loss. I had a suspicion Jeff Horn, A, being in his hometown, B, being motivated and hungry, C, all the nonsense with Amir Khan and all this, and then just Manny not taking it serious. I had a suspicion Jeff Horn was going to go in there, and at minimum, he was going to cause an upset, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what it was going to be an outcome, because it's too hard to tell. Because Manny can pull it out when he needs to, when he's coming from behind. Like, let's say Horn drops Manny like 3 or 4 times. Well, then maybe that happens, and then Manny comes back and gets a stoppage. Like, that is a real potential outcome that we saw could be. And so I suspected Horn was going to do something. I just didn't know what, and I'm just telling people, don't overlook this guy. Do not overlook him. Anybody that's on NSB listening to this will know there was a person there telling you, don't overlook Jeff Horn, don't overlook Jeff Horn, don't overlook Jeff Horn. Day of the fight, I'm watching it. Stylistically, Horn is brilliant. And everybody accuses him of dirty fighting. It's a fight. And I think it was Paulie that even said, if the ref lets you get away with whatever, it's legal, period. And so that's what the mindset has to be. When you're in there, your life's on the line. It's a fight. You have to go and do whatever you got to do to deal with what's in front of you. When I'm watching Pacquiao, yes, Pacquiao is counterpunching, but it was the wrong strategy, because Jeff Horn, this guy, he was all over Manny. He was throwing him across the ring. He was bullying him like crazy. And also, he was very brilliant in how he was evading the combos, Manny's flurries that he would do. Because what Horn would do is when he saw Manny coming forward, he would go lateral so that Manny couldn't land all of the punches. And then he would come, and then he would corner, and then he would hit him back. And Horn was throwing. And we know Manny has terrible defense. When he's under fire, his defense isn't there, especially at older age. I saw Horn, not only the bullying, not only the throwing. Yes, there was a little bit of dirty, but Horn's style of the lateral movement, getting out of the way of the flurry, is what saved him. Okay, then we get to, I believe it was round 9, and all of a sudden, it was actually round 8 that it started. Manny starts to switch his strategy and starts to get more aggressive instead of trying to counter all the time. And Horn's not able to handle it that well. Round 9 comes in. I'm pretty sure it's round 9. And Manny's all aggression. He's the old school Manny. He's throwing. Horn's getting bopped all over the ring. and you expect a stoppage. The ref did not stop it, and kudos to the ref for not stopping it, because it's not like Horn was not still trying. He was still trying, and he wasn't excessively hurt in that sequence, except for a couple punches that landed like flush on the chin. Gets to the end of the round, and in the corner, the ref goes over to Horn's corner and says, show me something this round, or I'm going to, as in round 10, or I'm going to stop it. Horn goes out there. I would argue rounds 10 and 11 are all Jeff Horn. Horn was not to be denied. He was all over Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao had no answers. Round 12 was a kind of a toss. I gave it to Jeff Horn. It was a war. The whole fight from start to finish was a war. Cards are announced. Jeff Horn is the winner by unanimous decision. So not just split decision, unanimous decision. Instantly, the internet crashes because everybody says Manny gets robbed, and Manny won that, despite the fact that Manny was getting thrown all around the ring and looked like a shell of himself. After the fight, they're doing the post-fight interview with Pacquiao and Roach, and Bob Arum, I think, was also there. And people were asking Manny's questions, and Manny just got his head held down. He knew he lost. He knew he didn't win that. Fast forward, and during the fight, actually, even first, you got Teddy Atlas, who was commentating, tells Jeff Horn, well, I thought you lost. And just right to his face, just disrespects him. Bradley, who was also commentating, and one funny story is that one of the reasons Bradley retired is that he was going to be called up to face Jeff Horn after Jeff Horn had won this. Bradley on commentary, he's also saying, this is close. Don't think that Manny's really winning this. This is close. I think it's close. Teddy Atlas has to bully Bradley to back down and kind of concede, okay, I think that Manny should have won at least. But he wasn't convinced because Manny didn't win that fight. Manny didn't win the fight. Watch the fight without commentary. Manny didn't win that. And you have to set aside the bias of being against dirty fighting. If the ref allows it, it's fair game. And your job as a fighter, any trainer will tell you, your life's on the line in there, dude. You need to go in there and do whatever you got to do to get this guy out of there. You heard me say it about Lomachenko versus Comey. You can't, Manny was too nice and took this guy light. And he got hurt. He was getting hurt. Photos flow around social media showing Jeff Horn in the hospital after the fact and Manny allegedly unscathed. That photo was not true as far as Manny unscathed. That was not true. You can look at the photos with their hands raised after the fight. Manny was bruised. Manny was jacked up. He was terrible. So yes, Manny was hurt. Horn was hurt from that one round. Horn was hurting Manny the entire fight through. Even the fights that you gave to Manny, Horn was still effective with the exception of rounds 8 and 9. Every other round, Horn had some good, solid punches he was landing because he was able to get away from the combos and then come back with flurries and throw Manny off. There's even one sequence where Manny starts his forward combo and he's heading towards the turnbuckle. Horn moves out the way and Manny keeps punching towards the turnbuckle because that's how he's trained. It's muscle memory. So no, Manny lost that fight. He lost it fair and square. After all this furor and frustration, Manny's team files a complaint with the WBO and the orgs. WBO hires a bunch of judges from around the world to watch the fight recorded. Those judges, in addition to the ones there, they unanimously agree Jeff Horn's the winner of the bout. They did not see that Manny won it. In fact, when they reevaluated it, they had Horn winning even wider. I personally had Jeff Horn winning 7 rounds because of his effectiveness. And the real kicker, I think, is round 12. I think round 12 fooled people into thinking that Horn was not effective when truthfully he was. Manny wasn't landing a lot of what it seemed like he was landing. And he's fast. It's hard to tell when he's really connecting. And his flurries and everything look flashy, but he's not doing anything. And he certainly isn't keeping the guy off you. And anybody that paid attention to round 10 and 11 saw that Manny was demoralized. He didn't know this. He didn't understand why this guy was still here. Manny cuts an interview and he says, yes, I was hoping the ref would stop the fight. Well, as I've said with Lomachenko, you can't do that. Your job is to get the guy out of there. So Manny basically, he pulled a Keith, actually. Interesting. He wanted the ref to stop the fight. He doesn't have that killer instinct. He didn't have that killer instinct. That's what got him a loss against Ugas, by the way. He didn't have it. He was holding back, and he didn't do what he was supposed to do. because what Manny should have done in what he did in round 9 is what he should have done from round 1 all the way through, and he would have won that fight. There's apparently a rematch clause on the books. Horn's calling out Manny, saying, let's do the rematch. If people thought I lost, let's run it back. This is why that statement that his team did, and he was on social media chewing out Manny, saying, let's do the rematch. If people thought I robbed you, let's do the rematch. We can do it, that's fine. We could do it anywhere else. It doesn't matter. That statement right there is the number one reason he's on the Lifeblood of Boxing series, because he called Manny out and said, let's do a rematch. Apparently, Manny had executed the rematch clause, is what we're hearing from Bob Arum. Then it was, and the funny story on this is, Stephen A. Smith was the first to say that Manny would do this for Floyd, and then it turned out he did it for Horn. Skip Bayless is one of the ones saying, no, clearly Jeff Horn won that. Jeff Horn easily won that fight because his aggression was there, and he was there, and Manny didn't have any answers. So now they're on opposite sides of the tunnel. But here's the thing, right? Allegedly, Manny does this rematch clause, so everybody's like, cool, run it back. If you think that Jeff Horn robbed this man, let's run it back and let's solve it once and for all. And I was excited for this. I'll tell you why I was excited, because I was confident that Manny would take it serious this time, that Manny would actually train hard and take this guy serious and get a stoppage on Jeff Horn, number one. Two, if he had done so, we wouldn't have been subject to Crawford holding the belt hostage for X number of years. Unfortunately, Manny would then later announce that, and the joke was Stephen A. Smith said that Manny would do this for Floyd, but he ended up doing this for Horn. I need to see to my people in my governmental duties. That's what he said, and backed off the Jeff Horn rematch, ducked it. That's a duck. I'm sorry, it is a duck when you don't want that smoke, because he could have fit it in. He chose not to. And listen, if he felt like he just was afraid of this guy, it is what it is, but he could have fought this guy. He could have easily rematched Jeff Horn, just figure out the timing. It didn't have to be immediate. Figure out a different timing. You know why I know he could have done it? Because in 2018, Manny went off to fight Lucas Matthisi in Malaysia. And Lucas Matthisi had a WBA at the time, and that was a soft touch because he knew Lucas Matthisi was on the way out. He knew that. That's the thing, is he could have fought Jeff Horn off a rematch in 2018 all the same and just have that be the immediate, because Jeff Horn wasn't ready. Jeff Horn was not ready at that time to take another fight. Jeff Horn wouldn't fight again until 2017 December against Gary Kokorin, but Gary Kokorin was a soft touch defense. It was an easy fight for him. He could have easily said, okay, I'll take Gary Kokorin and then I'll fight you on the rematch in 2018. If we look at the timeline, he could have made that work, which meant that they could have fought in June or July of 2018 as a rematch to the first fight. I think Manny would have easily stopped Jeff Horn, blitzed him and stopped him, but Manny ducked it. As a result, Horn has to fight Crawford in 2018. Now we're going to get away from Manny Pacquiao because Manny ducked the rematch, didn't want the smoke, and because of him, now Crawford's in the mix because Crawford's just come up to welterweight, and the notable story is that he wants to fight Errol Spence, who's the top guy now at 147. Errol Spence, they come face to face, and Spence says, get a belt, and then we talk about it. So then now, fresh off Crawford unifying at light welterweight, Crawford now in line for a title shot in his debut at 147. And there's a lot of smoke around this one, and I'm going to cover that. With Jeff Horn, of course, he predominantly has fought in Australia. I'm pretty sure every single fight he's had except Crawford took place in Australia of some layer. Didn't have to be Brisbane, but I'm pretty sure it took place in Australia at some layer. I know he's fought in New Zealand. I count New Zealand in that. When I say Australia, I know I probably shouldn't because they're different countries, but I count them together. But Horn had never fought outside of that sphere, that part of the world. So Horn had never fought overseas. Horn had never defended titles, world titles. He had defended regional titles, continental titles, but not world titles. And so he had never needed to travel. The fact that Manny went out to Australia was kind of a once in a lifetime thing. As the champion, what he should have done, if you ask me, is he should have said, no, you're going to come here to Australia and fight me. Why do I say that makes sense? We're just now hearing that we might see, unfortunately, CM Punk Kambosos versus Devin Haney, with Devin Haney being forced to fight him in Australia, because that's where Kambosos is from. So why is it that Kambosos can call that shot and say, no, you're going to come to me. You come here and we fight here in Australia, which is going to draw a lot more money because there's a lot more fans. They don't care if they really know the fighter nearly as much. As long as it's a hometown guy, they're going to come in droves and they're going to support their guy. The money is huge. But here, for whatever reason, they're not able to make it work to where Crawford is forced to go to Australia. Crawford has gone on record multiple times saying he's not going to fight overseas anymore. He refuses. This is fresh off him to being taken the distance by Ricky Burns because he fought Ricky Burns overseas in Scotland. And he had to go the distance in that fight. Outside of Ricky Burns, Crawford has never fought outside the United States. And so he might have just been smoked out by Ricky Burns overseas and Ricky Burns being able to take him the distance and him not being able to stop Ricky Burns. I don't know. All I know is I was not happy when I heard, okay, we're not going to fight this guy in Australia when Manny did it. People online like NSB are making excuses. He didn't want to get robbed deep. And my counter has always been, if you guys count Crawford as a pound-for-pound top guy, he should be able to beat you anywhere he feels like it. He should be able to go anywhere and beat you. He should not have any issue fighting you on your own turf and beating you. Why? Because that's what Spence did with Kell Brook. Spence went over there to Sheffield and beat Kell Brook on his own turf and stopped him. That's what I expect from top-tier fighters, is you have no problem. If that's what it takes, you will go over those shores, you will stop them on their home turf and make a statement. That's what I wanted to see from Crawford. That did not happen. I can't tell you why. So they're going to have this in, it's supposed to be Vegas, but it's Vegas. Then leading up to the fight, so they're doing the training, doing the camps, leading up to the fight, there's an announcement that Horn's having issues with the travel, but rightfully, understandably, he's having issues with the travel, all sorts of problems. There's things where there's a suspicion that either Crawford's camp or somebody on Arm's side or somebody is messing with Jeff Horn's situation, making it harder for him, never proven. Then there's some statement gets released that Terrence Crawford allegedly has damaged his hand, and so they have to delay the fight. Now, this is like weeks out. So Horn's wrapping up camp, and the timing is very particular. If you've ever been near the business, you understand that the timing of when you start camp and when you wrap up camp and travel and all that, it's a science. You got to get it just right. And if you don't, it can throw you off. Plus having to adjust to new time zones, the heat, the humidity, everything. Everything is worse when you're trying to make those adjustments and you've never been here. You've never fought here. So this statement about the hand comes out. Immediate, like the day after that comes out, there's a photo floating around social media. I have it somewhere in my files of Crawford, and he's taken photos, which is weird because he's married. He's taking photos of the top-ranked girls, and they are beautiful, but the point is you're married, dude. And he's showing it to somebody else who's taking a photo of him showing this photo on his camera phone with the hand that's allegedly injured. There's no wrap, there's no bandage, there's no nothing. Horn's camp comes out and says, we think that injury is bull. We want proof. We want a doctor's note. Show us something that proves you're injured, that truly proves you're injured. If you can't do that or you're not injured, the fight goes on schedule. Crawford refuses. Arum backs him up. Now it's sketchy because the fight's delayed, which throws off camp. And as I just said, it's hard to manage that when you're trying to time it all together. And it's the first time you've ever fought overseas and you're trying to deal with time zone differences and differences in weather and differences in condition. It's a different world out here compared to Australia. Everything is shaken up for him, and he's having to deal with this. And now we got this nonsense hand excuse, and we know from what we see, what Crawford himself proved, his hand wasn't injured. We know that. So the fight gets delayed. There's issues about shoes. There's issues about socks. There's issues about all this stuff. All this smoke is coming up. That's kind of suspicious because it's never happened to Horn before. But because he's traveling overseas, we can't discount that something did happen. That kind of stuff happens when you're traveling. Get to the fight. In the fight, Horn had a very solid first round because Crawford usually uses that as a feeling out round. There was a point sequence where Crawford lands a flush shot right on Crawford's chin. Something he's practiced like an overhand, and Crawford takes it and he just come forward. Crawford, from that point, regardless of that one sequence, Crawford is dominant the rest of the fight. Get to the last, and I believe it's the 9th round. Last sequence of the fight has Crawford, and I believe just prior to this, Crawford had dropped Horn the first time, and this would have been the first time he had ever been dropped by somebody at this level in the world class, because Manny didn't do it, right? But he had been dropped before. I'm pretty sure it was Randall Bailey put him down. I don't remember if Ali Fanika put him down, but I know Randall Bailey put him down, obviously. But again, that's at the Intercontinental. It's at the regional. At the world level, this is the first time that Horn's been put down. So Horn gets right back up. He looks like he's not hurt, but he is kind of stunned. The next round, I'm pretty sure in round 9 now, Crawford's going after him. And I have a GIF of this. You can go watch it again because the fight's up for free. The final sequence of the fight, Crawford lands. He's throwing punches. It reminds me of Wilder's windmill against Gerald Washington. Crawford's just throwing for the fences. Horn is ducking and dodging and moving. Crawford landed like 1 of like 4 of the punches. But, Horn's still trying to throw back. He's landing some, but not really landing. But he's trying, and he's defensive, but he's on the back foot. The ref automatically jumps in there and weighs out the fight, even though Horn was still moving, still evading. Only 1 punch landed in the sequence, and the ref just jumps in there. Okay, it is what it is. Crawford is your new WBO welterweight champion. Horn immediately asked for a rematch, which I gave him major respect. He didn't run from it. He said, and he was respectful. He said, you know what, good win. Let's run it back. Crawford ducked it and said, nope, I don't want the rematch. Because he wants to take the title and kind of run away with it. That's a strategy. That's what he does. It is what it is. Crawford, of course, would then, for the next however many years, 2 years, I believe it was, goes on a run of just lesser fighters and 1 mandatory, but lesser fighters that he's fighting. And everybody's calling him number 1 pound for pound, despite the fact that he's not stepping up in competition along the way as a champion until he meets Sean Porter. And then, of course, we learned after the fact there's an asterisk there because Porter had 2 bad hips. So Crawford, this is why I was upset that Manny ducked the rematch, because if Manny had taken the rematch, he would have stopped Jeff Horn. I believe that. I believe he would have taken out Jeff Horn in 2018. Then we wouldn't have had Crawford going on the run of lesser fighters, and we wouldn't have people calling him number 1 pound for pound because there would have been no opportunity. And we would have had Crawford hopefully accept his B-side. Like, the whole history changed because Manny ducked that rematch. And that's why I was pissed at Manny, because he should have taken that rematch. He would have easily stopped Jeff Horn if you took it seriously. I firmly believe that. Then you would have had Manny get back his WBO title another time, and then Manny would have been in the mix because he certainly would have still been positioned for a fight against Keith later. Then Manny becomes unified at, WBO and WBA. Then you get Spence's IBO and IBF and WBC. Now you got a compelling fight there. And then Spence gets to totally unify the division. Or if Spence had still gotten injured, Manny fights somebody else who beats him, let's say Ugas, which I don't think would have been in position, but let's say that happens. And now Ugas, now the fight that we're having now, would have completely unified the division. But because Manny ducked that rematch, we got cheated out of it because Crawford took the belt and went on his run of lesser fighters and kept it hostage in Top Rank for the longest time. So after Horn loses to Terrence Crawford and Crawford ducks the rematch on that one, Horn's got to take another fight. He's called out by Anthony Mundine, who's another local favorite. He's a legend, regardless of what NSB and other places want to say. Anthony Mundine is a legend. He's always going to be a legend. He's going to be in Hall of Fames because Anthony Mundine, predominantly, there's a couple of fights, but predominantly it's because of him stopping Shane Mosley, Sugar Shane Mosley in 2013. And we could talk about age all we care to. The point is he stopped Shane Mosley in 2013. And Anthony Mundine has one of those where he has a really solid record to speak of, even in loss. Charles Hatley, I rate that one. Danny Green, I rate that one. Shane Mosley, I rate that one. Daniel Gill, I rate that one. So he's got a solid record of his own, and he's a local favorite. He always has been a local favorite, is Anthony Mundine. And people criticize his history because he came, I believe, cricket or soccer? He came from some other sport, and they criticize him for that. The point is he's a very popular character, was Mundine. Horn's got to take a fight. He takes the fight with Anthony Mundine in 2018, in late 2018. Mundine is selling the fight. Mundine is a master class at selling this fight against Jeff Horn, that he's here and he's going to upset this guy and he's going to buck the odds and he's going to take this crown for, because he's back regional, is Horn. And Horn goes in there and just knocks him, leaves him stiff. Leaves Mundine stiff on his back in the first round. And we knew that Mundine had had challenges before of getting knocked out, but this was bad. Seeing Mundine like that, seeing him stiff, there's photos floating around of him stiff on his back, that was bad. And it helped elevate Horn, and it got people thinking, okay, Horn didn't, either he had a bad night or whatever against Crawford because he's fresh off the Crawford stoppage, but yet he's able to go in there and do that against Mundine. So now they're saying, okay, let's see if there's something to this. So now they booked the fights against Michael Zerafa. Michael Zerafa is another local guy. Zerafa, the reason he stands out is because he part-time moonlights as a stripper. And so people call him the stripper because of that. But his nickname is really Pretty Boy. But they call him the stripper. Now, Michael Zerafa was not highly regarded as a fighter because of anything that he did in the past in boxing. His regard comes because of the outside of the ring stuff that he was doing. And then most notably, he had sparred Dwight Ritchie, and then Dwight Ritchie died because of the sparring, and that was a freak accident. That was in 2019. That's what Zerafa is most known for, in my opinion, is the Dwight Ritchie situation, as unfortunate as that is. But it's not like he didn't fight decent fighters. He fought Peter Quillen, Kid Chocolate in 2015. Kid Chocolate, of course, went on the decline for unknown reasons. He started out, he had a run, he was hyped. I'm pretty sure he was like HBO at the time, and they were hyping him as one of the next big things. And for whatever reason, he just completely fell off. He completely dropped off. He was early on one of the eye test fighters. He was getting stoppages, and he had some good successes against Nijikam for WBO at middleweight. He beat Gabe Rosado, Gabe Rosado beat him. So he beat Gabe Rosado first. Yeah, he beat Gabe Rosado first. That's right. So Nijikam, he wins the title. He beat Winky Wright. Gabe Rosado, he beat. That was right. That was a defense. And it was Andy Lee where he went to a draw. And from the Andy Lee draw, nothing was the same with him. It seemed like he just either lost passion or something. Something fell off with him because he fought Michael Zerafa the fight after that in 2015, knocked him out, but then Danny Jacobs blitzed him. And that was a shocking fight. If anybody remembers that one. Jacobs just came out, and this is totally not like Jacobs. He just came out and went after him. And Quillen takes a shot, and Quillen goes down. He comes up, and he's bouncing. He looks like he's ready, and the ref just stops it. And everybody's looking like, what the heck's going on? Why did you stop that? Quillen looked like he was ready to go. It's another one of those trigger stoppages, just like with Crawford Horn, just like with so many others, just weird. Quillen would, I believe he had officially announced his retirement at some point. The fight that took him out was Angulo, and of course Angulo, he should not have lost to Angulo. He should not have. But Angulo is tough, but he should not have lost to Angulo. So it felt like he had just declined, and something went wrong with him, and nobody really figured out what was the deal with Kid Chocolate. And again, I'm pretty darn sure that he was HBO through and through. That he was like one of the headliners at the time. They were really hyping him. So he knocks out Zerafa, does Kid Chocolate. Knocks out Zerafa. Zerafa now is kind of on the comeback to kind of get back on the trail. Zerafa goes on a run where he's dominant. Meets Kell Brook in Sheffield, loses a wide decision in 2018. And for anybody who remembers this period of time with Kell Brook in that span of 2018 through, I'll back up a little bit. Spence and Kell Brook is 2017 in Sheffield. Spence beats Kell Brook on home turf. Repchenko is in 2018. Then he beats Zerafa, and then he beats DeLuca, and then he hits Crawford, and then he hits Khan. This final stint after he lost to Errol Spence, Kell Brook he's not the same person. He's he's declined. He's getting the wins, but he's not anywhere impressive. I argue he shouldn't have lost against Terrence Crawford even. It seemed like just something wasn't fully clicking on all gears. And there was even one of the fights, and I think it was Remchenko, or it might have even been Zerafa, where his trainer is even saying, well, he's been out for a while. Give him a chance. He wasn't all that good, but, he'll recover. And something was really off with Kell Brook. And so when he beats Zerafa, it told people that Zerafa was on a decline too, because Kell Brook wasn't the best of himself, is where I'm getting at with this. So now Zerafa gets in with Jeff Horn in 2019 for regional titles, stops Jeff Horn, takes him 9 rounds to do it. He didn't look amazing in stoppage. Jeff Horn actually looked like less of himself. It looked like Jeff Horn might have gassed late. They do a rematch later that year, per Jeff asking for it. And the most notable thing is, Zerafa going on the interview saying, this is it. We're not doing this again. This is the last time we're doing it. Jeff Horn gets his hand raised. It's a majority decision over 10 rounds. And people are wondering, okay, what's going on with Jeff Horn? Because it didn't seem like he was all the way there. He got his hand raised, but it didn't seem like he was all the way there. It seemed like something was off. And people looked at Glenn Rushton, who has been Jeff Horn's trainer pretty much since he turned pro, as not helping him adapt, not helping him grow as a fighter, that where he was coming up. And the reason I told the whole story up to now is when you look back at the Randall Bailey and Ali Fanica, et cetera, there's a pattern in what Jeff Horn was able to do, which is basically he was able to out-bully you. He was able to out-strong you. He was able to out-blitz you in some cases. It was not that he was stylistically brilliant. That was never his game. He was always just a strong guy that was able to use his strength and size to kind of bully you. And with Zerafa, Jeff Horn, he struggled where we didn't think he should struggle. It seemed like he should be able to take out Zerafa much easier than he did, but it seemed like he wasn't all the way there. Whether that was a motivation thing or a training thing or whatever, this is in Brisbane, so he didn't have the excuse of travel. Nobody knew what was going on. Then it's announced that he's going to fight Tim Tszyu. So now Jeff Horn has an amazing knockout win over Anthony Mundine. He avenged the loss for Michael Zerafa, but didn't look that great en route to this. And people are concerned what's going on with Jeff Horn. Tim Tszyu at that point, though, hadn't fought anybody. Tim Tszyu was essentially a prospect when he fought Jeff Horn. He had some decent wins, Dwight Ritchie most notably, but he was still considered a prospect level because he had never fought anybody that was truly world level up to that point in Tim Tszyu. He was banking on the last name. His name, of course, Kostya Tszyu, who had been a legend and who had made his home in Australia. But Tim Tszyu was kind of banking off the last name. Horn's camp called that out, saying you're using your dad's name to sell this, and you're not going to beat Jeff Horn because you're not on his level. Most people who looked at the fight at a distance believed that Tim Tszyu should win, if only because Tim Tszyu had more fundamentals than Jeff Horn by far. However, nobody could discount what we saw in the X factor with Jeff Horn, which was we saw against Manny, which is that even when you might be fundamentally sound, he still seems to be sneaky and able to deal with you. This fight, Jeff Horn, he's able to take him out in 8 rounds. Does Tim Tszyu. Stoppage. The notable part of that fight, in watching the two, Tszyu at no point was in any danger, was in any risk, he was not in any trouble. Tszyu was in total control. Horn didn't look like he was in there at all. He didn't look like he was in the fight at all. And it was actually his corner that stopped the fight. Horn was going to continue going out, but his corner stopped the fight, which the interesting story there is against Manny, they were thinking about stopping the fight, and his dad even had said, I wanted him to stop the fight against Manny in round 9. So just the level of punishment, they didn't want Horn to take that much punishment. He was getting waxed. He was getting beat. But they never thought about stopping the fight against Crawford. So they never felt like he was ever hurt against Crawford at all. They never felt like he was hurt against Zerafa, even though he was on a couple of occasions. But against Tim Tszyu, it was enough of a beating that there was no reason to continue the fight, and they stopped the fight. And Jeff Horn hasn't fought since. That was in 2020. And Jeff Horn, for those that don't know, he has been a strong advocate for bullying campaigns. So he has talked to kids because he was bullied when he came up, and that was one of the motivations to get into boxing. So he goes, he talks to kids, he does programs, he does some sparring every now and then. He does these things to try to, and he's continued the message on social media about anti-bullying things. And he got the key to the city for Brisbane. He beat one of the best fighters in the world in Manny Pacquiao. Nobody can take that away from him. He held world title gold. Nobody can take that away from him. He has wins over 3 of the best to ever do it. Nobody can take that away from him. Jeff Horn, I believe he's done all he needed to do. I wouldn't want to see him come back other than just the nostalgia, because I'm a fan of his and what he does and what he represents and how hard he fought to get to that level. He took the dream. Started late, so he didn't have the starting from a kid pedigree that everybody else did. And we see that a lot of fighters that didn't get that chance to start from when you were a kid go on and they're able to cause some trouble for the ones that did start as a kid, because the ones that start as a kid, they're kind of trapped in muscle memory. And the ones that start later, they're more adaptive. They're able to adapt a little bit better. So as I said before, and if Jeff Horn's listening, I'll straight say it. I'm a fan. Always have been a fan, not just because of what's in the ring, but also outside the ring. Because this guy, he was one of the toughest to ever lace him up, for sure. He was a warrior, unlike anything we've seen. He wasn't afraid to go through fire to try to get a win, and he worked hard. He worked hard coming up, and then shocked the world by beating a legendary fighter, Manny Pacquiao, became a world champion, which not every fighter can say, bucked the odds at all avenues, gets the key to the city, gets mainstream notoriety, and yes, he took some flack, but hopefully he's been able to kind of dust that off his shoulder, focus on what he's been doing, celebrate what he's accomplished, and look back and say, I was able to make history, because he did. He made history. There's if we think about it, there are very few fighters that have ever beaten Manny Pacquiao at all. Torre Campo knocks him out. Zerafa stops him. Eric Morales, decision. Tim Bradley, decision. Marquez, right? Floyd Mayweather, Jeff Horn, Yordenis Ugas. Okay, so I got 8 fighters on deck. Of those 8 fighters, every last one of these fighters, with the possible exception right now of Yordenis Ugas, every last one of these fighters is a future Hall of Famer. Easy. Every last one of them. We can say Torre Campo's not. He will be, because of the exposure that he got. Zerafa, he will be locally, regional, Thailand, because Thailand is a lot more flexible with their Hall of Fame. So he will be. It's almost guaranteed. Eric Morales is a lock. Pretty sure he's already in a lot of them. Tim Bradley's a lock. Marquez is a lock. Floyd's already in it. And Jeff Horn's going to be. So Jeff Horn can say, not only did I beat a future Hall of Famer, Manny Pacquiao, but Jeff Horn's going to be in a Hall of Fame someday for what he's accomplished, even if it's in Australia. He's going to be recognized, and he can take that and sit on that. And I celebrate him. I celebrate him as a fighter, because we don't have very many like him that are just warriors at spirit and heart. And they're also genuinely good guys. They're not what you see today that everybody celebrates, like Bumlanga. They're genuinely good guys that want to do good, and they're doing good in their environment and with their country, and they support the sport and the business, and they're warriors, and they're not going to go out, with dull stylistic fights. They want to entertain the fans, and they want to celebrate the sport better. So kudos to Jeff the Hornet Horn for an amazing career. If he doesn't come back, and I suspect he won't, but if he does, I'll celebrate it. I'll watch it. But I think he's done enough. I personally think he's done enough. If he does come back, I will celebrate it, because I do want to see guys like him help the business sustain at the same time. He doesn't have anything else necessarily to prove for what he's been able to do, what he's been able to accomplish. And he's and he has nothing to be ashamed of with his record either. Yes, he has 3 losses, but I think we've put too much credence on losing. We have to look at who he lost to and when he lost to them. He lost to Terrence Crawford under very sketchy circumstances that we can't know exactly what was going on there and why that happened. And then Crawford ducked the rematch. He lost to Michael Zerafa. Something was off in Horn's head, and he avenged that like a warrior should. And then losing to Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu's on the rise. Tim Tszyu's been doing really good stuff ever since fighting Jeff Horn. So he might simply have been just that breakout prospect, and Jeff Horn was just the first one to kind of expose that guy to us on a mainstream level. So Jeff the Hornet Horn